My whole life basically changed almost overnight. I was diagnosed with a very rare neurological disorder. It was labeled as the suicide disease. And the reason why it was labeled as that is that because it's one of the top most painful disorders that the human body can endure. It was a shock to the system. Obviously when you're in your early 30s, the last thing that you usually think of is your health. I found a whole new world of holistic health, and I was able to find a team to go down a whole different way of looking at my health. From you're a healthy person who just got this random idiopathic diagnosis to you're actually not as healthy as you thought.
What is functional medicine like, and how does it differ from traditional approaches? I believe you get this question a lot.
In a nutshell, it's patient-centered versus diagnosis-centered. It is really scientifically and it's evidence-based, as much as we want to argue that sometimes, approach to healthcare where you're really trying to identify and address the core of the disease versus the symptoms that the patient is experiencing.
What are some things that they could, do to improve their health span, not just their lifespan?
There's core fundamentals: nutrition, sleep. I call it movement, not so much exercise. Let's say more movement. Social emotional support, because that's one of the biggest fundamentals.
I'm very excited to have Dr. Neda Gioia with us today. She is on the Inner Scorecard podcast. And so Dr. Neda is an optometrist who looks at eye health a little differently. She runs the Integrative Vision in New Jersey, where she combines eye health with nutrition and functional medicine. After seeing the impact nutrition had on her own health, she dove deep into the science and became the only optometrist in the country certified in both nutrition and functional medicine. She's been practicing for almost 20 years, and she has built programs like See Health and Eye Exam Plus that go beyond a standard eye checkup. And she's helping people connect the dots between what they eat, how they live, and how they see. Dr. Neda also led the Ocular Wellness Nutrition Society and serves on the board of New Jersey Society of Optometrics Physicians. At the heart of her work, she's passionate about showing people showing that taking care of their eyes isn't just about glasses or contacts, it's about taking care of your whole body. With that said, Dr. Neda, I'm very pleased to have you here. I think the starting question I wanted to ask you was, most of the people that I talk to are, in their mid-30s, working 40 to 60 hours a week in their corporate and feeling constantly tired, but being told that everything's fine, their blood work comes out normal and all the tests they do, everything looks normal, but they still feel there's more in there. I'm wondering my goal for this conversation is for those people to take something away, either as some advice on itself, but also as a starting step into researching on their own. Mm-hmm. And I believe that many of my listeners can afford good healthcare, but they still want actionable advice. Could you talk about what are the few things that they would need to understand about their health that could change the way they see, their health apart from the conventional way of looking at health?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak about not just eye health, but what you're asking me right now. I actually had this conversation yesterday with somebody who's a physician, and I said, our current model is based on keeping you alive, not making you thrive. Very different concepts, right? So absolutely, a lot of people who may feel like their symptoms aren't, glaringly obvious, right? Maybe they're tired, as you said, or, just feeling something a little bit off. They have standard workups, which are fine, where they're testing standard of care type of conditions, which we need, and there's no answers. So just because you've gone through that conventional type of model doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong. So this is where healthcare is, I don't want to say it's splitting. I think it's more of the concept, it's advancing, because we're seeing now that trajectory where we were really looking at the patient with these really just checkpoints of you're okay, as long as these labs are good, you're fine, is changing, because now we're seeing other parts of the body that are acting up, and we have other ways of testing, deeper ways of testing, where we see these imbalances within multiple systems that may be affecting the primary reason the patient is coming in, but it's not a direct correlation, how we would think in a standard model where it would hit a certain code. We're based on codes, our medical model. So I would say, in terms of your audience, right now, how we are in the system right now, because of course I always have a wish list of, I wish our system was a certain way, but I like to be realistic. If you are seeking more answers, you need to start being in the driver's seat and find the answers and find the team that is willing to find the answers with you. So not just providing my patients with this type of conversation, it's also giving them empowerment tools to basically say, if your symptoms are that, obvious to you and affecting your life, then you need to be a driver and find the right team to help support finding why you're feeling that way. Because otherwise, it's very frustrating in terms of right now.
That's very interesting. And could you talk about, like, how did you come about the functional and integrative medicine, and why was it important to you? I heard in some other conversations that there was a personal health crisis in your early 30s that completely changed your perspective on practicing medicine. And then subsequently we'll go down the rabbit hole of, what is functional medicine, but how did that leak? Like, what was the insight that led you there, down that path, which you're still on right now?
It was a shock to the system. Obviously, when you're in your early 30s, the last thing that you usually think of is your health, typically speaking. Meaning outside of your standard checkups, you're not thinking, oh, something's going to happen to me, right? You're kind of thriving. So my whole life basically changed almost overnight. I was diagnosed with a very rare neurological disorder called trigeminal neuralgia. And at that time, there was internet. So I Googled it and I saw basically this black hole. It was labeled as the suicide disease. And the reason why it was labeled as that is that because it's one of the top most painful disorders that the human body can endure. And people would rather kill themselves than to endure this pain. So it came out of quite literally nowhere. I thought, thriving. And my whole life changed because of that. So, and
then were you diagnosed because something was happening, or was it like just in a random, just a annual exam?
No, I started suffering pain in my teeth. So, I mean, obviously, if you're 30s, what are you going to say? Oh, I go to the dentist, right?
Yeah.
Well, of course, I have like a cavity or something. So I had this very unusual tooth pain, and that kind of became multiple teeth. And it was like, it took a good year to even isolate what was happening to me. So I started to, feeling pain in my face, only on one side. And I was very lucky. I was already in the medical field. And at some point when I started going from doctor to doctor, like, what is this pain? I don't understand. It keeps getting worse. I realized maybe I need to, start figuring it out on my own, because none of the solutions are actually fixing the pain. I was very close with a neuro-ophthalmologist, and I started explaining to him what was happening to me. And he said, come on in. I need to look at you. I need to just, and he gave me this diagnosis at the end. of trigeminal neuralgia. And it was like, wait, what? I thought, I had a cavity. We went from that to a neurological disorder. So being diagnosed kind of with my own proactiveness, because a lot of people are misdiagnosed for years. I was able to diagnose myself in 1 year, was the first step. The second step was, of course, I want solutions. I want, okay, fine, I have this condition. What do I do? And it was as I said, a black hole of there's nothing you can do. You're going to be on pain medications for the rest of your life. We don't know why this happens. We don't know. There's no solutions. There's some random brain surgeries that may help. I went through so many tests. I went to probably the top doctors in the nation, New York City. I mean, you name it. I still have my book of all the doctors I saw during that time, because I had a very unusual feeling that I need to document this. I just had a feeling I want to document this. And I did. I have a journal on this whole journey of this unusual diagnosis. And I have to say, at some point, the pain was so bad, I went on disability, although I was on so many medications. And then I even was open to go into an exploratory brain surgery. Again, exploratory, because there was nothing that was found. There was anatomically, I was normal, but there's these procedures that might help. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. Let me go for brain surgery and see what happens. See what you see when you go in there. Maybe something you don't see on the MRIs. I don't know. And there's this, when you start going into this path of a different kind of version of healthcare, and when patients now tell me things like this, there's this feeling. It was just this, I don't know, there was a feeling in my gut that this is not what I want to do. So quite literally, I would say 2 to 3 days before my surgery, I called up the center and I said, I can't do this. This doesn't feel right. So I canceled the surgery. And I read a book. I happened to see something on TV by Dr. David Perlmutter. He was on some major show like Oprah, whatever it was. And I read this book called Grain Brain. And I read it and I was like, this is a physician. He's talking about food and just inflammation and things like that. That sparked my interest. And then I always say things happen for the, things happen to you sometimes if you're open to the messages. I had to move to Seattle and I found a whole new world of holistic health, because naturopathy in that state is actually licensed. And I was able to find a team to go down a whole different way of looking at my health. From you're a healthy person who just got this random idiopathic diagnosis to you're actually not as healthy as you thought. You have all these imbalances that no one's addressed. Let's fix them all, or help you fix them all. And let's see how you feel. And after about 1 to 2 years of very intense treatment in that version, functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, I've been pain-free, medication-free ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
That story scared me and gave me that story scared me and gave me goosebumps at the same time. That's
No, and I have friendly reminders because I forget this. Sometimes you take your life for granted, and sometimes I'm like, you literally could have been disabled in this way for the rest of your life. So, I have this friendly reminder. So that is where my mission literally is in my core belief system. And I don't know, if I never went through this, maybe I wouldn't have this conversation with you probably, but whatever it is. And that's where I couldn't, I'm a doer. So then I said, that's it. Everything in my life will now change from this step forward. And we will reflect why I was given this chance to thrive versus just be alive.
That seems very core to your personality. Somebody who this is from this conversation and our previous conversation, that I think you are a person who, first of all, doesn't doesn't just adjust to okayishness or just managing things. You want to be in the having thriving results, as you said. But secondly, you also feel, as a person who has high agency, who would go deeper, figure out things, and action them, not just because a lot of the times, in your case, similar to other cases, like in my family and others, like people just rely. They're like, okay, I consulted one doctor. They seem to know a lot more than me. They use terms that I never heard before. And, you can't be, I can't challenge that person's opinion, and this is what it's going to be. And interestingly, I think, just like digressing a little bit, but I was reading a book by Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, and it was talking about a term called medical iatrogenics, which essentially just means that the downside of intervention, which, in your case, I think you kind of mentioned as gut feeling as well, but I would imagine that you also weighed the negatives, right, on the cons of that surgery. Like, what if, like, not just from, like, one of the obvious cons would be, what if they don't figure out anything? But what if they mess up something, like, and that is, the downside is unlimited there. So that's very interesting how you put that. And I think that kind of opened my eyes to also, looking at research, the research that exists with a bias, that what other research has been done on the negative side of things. Like, if you recommend for a patient a chemotherapy, then do you really know what are the, the cons of it, apart from just fatigue and, the sickness that you get after that? That's very interesting. Could you break down for us, like, what is functional medicine, like, and how does it differ from traditional approaches? I believe you get this question a lot. But it's very important for us to be defining, like, as you said, that this is not like, this is, it seems like an evolution, from the traditional approach. It's not really as two branches. And I'm wondering, like, if you could explain, like, the term functional medicine, and, like, how does it differ? And also give us some example, like, from us, like, visiting doctors, like finding providers, and then, waiting in the queues, which is probably longer time than actually getting the treatment done, and then waiting for the results and not having the ability to interpret the results, then again hiring another consultant or another doctor to figure out those results. That, so it's just a lot of back and forth.
This is it's obviously a standard question. And I would say right now there's a little bit of a hot debate about it, because there is more of a spotlight on the functional medicine approach to healthcare. In a nutshell, it's patient-centered versus diagnosis-centered, if that makes sense. And it is still a scientific-based approach. It's not, just based on somebody feeling like this connection should be made. It is really scientifically, and it's evidence-based, as much as we want to argue that sometimes, approach to healthcare, where you're really trying to identify and address the core of the disease versus the symptoms that the patient is experiencing. So you have to look at the individual, where their needs might be very different with the same symptom, with the same condition, versus the next individual. So again, going back to standard healthcare, we really kind of we clump them a lot within almost like a diagnosis, right? We put all patients within one diagnosis kind of category. But with functional medicine, yes, we're looking at their condition, their symptoms. We're still looking at that. But are we also reflecting on what that patient has as an individual, whether it's their physical abilities, their mental, emotional health, their nutritional imbalances, other symptoms that they may be having that don't necessarily support the general diagnosis of their health condition. And a very standard prime example is a patient comes in with an autoimmune condition. Okay. This I deal with all the time. And sadly, that is a very common diagnosis. And autoimmune, obviously, that's a wide spectrum of disorders. But in the functional medicine approach, we have to look at gut health. And of course, this is a very general word, how their digestive system works, how they are processing nutrients, and ultimately, if there's imbalances in their microbiome. Because I would say even conventional health, in addition to the functional medicine model, we all agree that inflammation can happen within the gut, within the small intestines, even in the stomach lining, etc. So it's more in depth of looking at how multiple systems can affect that one problem that the patient is coming in with, and really look at it with a scientific, lens, but looking at multiple nodes, not just why the patient is complaining, and putting it together and creating, I call it like a system or a multi-node approach to the patient's protocol for health. So instead of giving just a drug, and it's not, and another thing with functional medicine, I want to say, it's not anti-medication. That is not to be, I don't like people thinking that it's like no one in functional medicine likes to use medications or standard allopathic care. No, it's understanding that has its value. It's a tool in the toolbox, but let's not ignore everything else that also affects our whole core inflammation, whether that's a core fundamental of the patient's condition, alongside other parts of life that we know can affect, our sympathetic tone, which can affect different diseases, or our mindset. Just our mindset alone can affect our cortisol levels. So it's a beautiful way of approaching healthcare without throwing out standard healthcare. And that's what I really want people to understand. We're not throwing out standard healthcare. We want to make it better. That's the problem right now. We need to make it better. So without using the 101 definition of functional medicine, because I know we use the word root cause of disease, and that's getting a little bit of a pushback in certain medical models. Yes, that is one of the core fundamentals, but ultimately it's looking at the whole body system and outside reasonings without just these standard, drug way of fixing a condition or reducing symptomology. And I do think that this healthcare model will be the new standard of care at some point.
Got it. And could you, I think you briefly touched upon that. Could you talk more about it, the functional medicine being in practice? I'm wondering, I kind of read about it. So it looks at, as you said, a more holistic approach, which looks at your diet, your sleep, your mental health. It looks at your social factors, like how are you feeling overall? And but there has to be I'm trying to understand, how does it work in practice? Because if all these factors are considered, then it might be too many areas which contribute. And that's where I think that the traditional medicine is way more simpler, because you have a problem, this drug will exactly solve that problem, but if you have another problem, you'll have to go to another doctor and figure that one out, and there's no connectedness. So I also feel this is like a resource issue, right? Like if you spend so much time on one person, very personalized, it is probably going to cost a lot more. But could you talk about in practice, how are you able to factor in all these different facets for patients, from a patient's perspective?
So right now you're spot on. The delivery of this has not been well organized yet. There's a huge gap right now, huge, where whether a patient wants the model or even a doctor is starting to use the model. So that is actually one of my, so there's one part of me that's obviously the part that wants to start implementing this in my own service, right? Outside of my own personal struggles, right? And finding these gaps, exactly what you're saying, is where I find it, one, fascinating, and two, almost like challenging, but not with a pessimistic view, but with a really hopeful view. So going back to, it's too hard. I mean, basically what you're saying, it's just too hard. There's too many things. There's too many layers to this. There's too many variables. And I will argue, until you actually start doing it as a provider, yes, it's not easy. But when you start doing it, you start seeing how hard it isn't. Because yes, there's so many things, right? As you said, there's so many of these variables I just threw out at you. But when you start having a patient-centered communication versus a doctor, I tell you what to do type of communication, you can start teasing out those variables. So it sounds like, there's so many things, right? But when you actually start having this trust level care, and you're able to start teasing out those conversations with patients, you will start to see where your priorities are, right? So a prime example for me is autoimmune. Let's go back to autoimmune. And my patients who have had severe trauma, right? I'm not talking about any diet, right? I'm not even talking about diet. Severe trauma. This is something that I know wholeheartedly is one of the root causes of a lot of autoimmune disease. It's basically pent up trauma that has never been processed or spoken about, or the patient has never really let it out, or has never actually addressed it. So having that trust level with patients, I'm able to tease that out a lot. So now I have the role of, okay, I am not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, right? But now we are aware of something that we can start targeting. And yes, I would have to refer or create a little bit of another team viewpoint, right? Or another team for the patient, as long as they're willing to move in that direction. And that can be used with an insurance model. It doesn't always have to be this outside, everything is a outside of insurance model. So it's not just me trying to fix everything. It's finding avenues for the patient to start seeking that no other practitioner would have even recommended. Until, yes, we have a newer maybe model in the future where we have this system where your standard healthcare clinic has a multi-mode and multidisciplinary team, which we do have these systems already coming out. Like, these companies have already launched, and I'll give you some prime examples. But I have to right now use what I know in the system that I can give that patient support in. So I would argue also, I don't need to fix everything either, because at the end of the day, the patient is still better off, even if I'm fixing 3 out of the 5 variables, right? So, yes, we want everything to be perfect. Even myself being in the functional medicine model as a patient, I know I can't fix everything. It's not possible. There's certain things that I have that will always stay with me that I cannot perfectly fix. But I fixed what I
Okay.
could with
Right.
my own team, with, with my motivation. So, it's almost like we don't want to make it so perfect of a model. Let's just get closer to it, because that's better
Right.
than nothing.
And it seems like, yeah, I would agree. I think that's just the overall feeling most people have with the medical system is there's a big gap. And yeah, I agree. We're not trying to solve everything all at once, which is ideal, but not scalable or not executable. But doing even a little bit helps a lot. And just coming to the question, like earlier we were trying to talk about evidence-based, lifestyle intervention. So now imagine this, like, people in their mid-30s, they can afford good healthcare, they're way above, average salaries, and they have good insurance, they have good access. But they're still dealing with, like, chronic fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, sleep issues, for tech people, back issues. Um, I'm wondering, like, what are the biggest threats that they don't even know they're facing? Because, again, these could be just isolated symptoms, but how do they look at it more holistically? And then subsequently, like, what are some things that they could, do to improve their health span, not just their lifespan?
Yeah. So longevity medicine, let's put that maybe in that category. There's core fundamentals that we always want to think about, whether we have symptoms or we don't have symptoms. And that's nutrition, sleep. I call it movement, not so much exercise. Let's say more movement. Social emotional support, because that's one of the biggest fundamentals, because that actually reflects on everything else. So, for example, like, you have somebody in their early 30s who's not sleeping well, right? Very, very, uh, very obvious, to them. They're tired. Let's just say they have an aura ring too. They're a little proactive. They have a little bit of that biohacking type of personality. We know that sleep is actually so essential for many different conditions as prevention, and not even in the eye world. So sleep in terms of dry eye disease, glaucoma, diabetes in the eye, sleep actually can affect that, meaning lack of sleep, poor sleep. So the trickle down effect is, now you have a risk factor. So it's not so much you're going to get one certain condition because you have poor sleep. It's that you are increasing your risk factor for a whole onslaught of different conditions, not just, let's just say, diabetes or cardiovascular conditions, because you're losing certain, if you have apnea, for example, that really puts stress on the body. So, one of the fundamentals is, going through the steps of how to improve sleep. Digital reduction prior to your time of sleep, making sure you have circadian balance, circadian support throughout the day. You're getting blue light in the early part of your day. Those little step tools to help ensure that you're getting good sleep, which reduces your risk of many other health conditions going down the line when you get into your, let's just say, 50s and 60s. As you said, chronic fatigue, although that's a little bit of many things can affect that, brain fog, etc. As you said, that's usually a symptom of something, right? There's some imbalance, whether it's cortisol, cortisol imbalance, nutritional imbalances, micronutrient imbalances. There's inherently something that is imbalanced. Now, I can't tell you exactly what, because then we go back to the conversation of, this is an individual. Where do they live? What is their toxic load? What are they exposed to? What are they again, eating and ingesting and not eating and not ingesting. So, to optimize that, obviously the patient's going to feel better, but they really have to start thinking about some of the basics first. As I said, what am I eating and not eating? Do I have the ability to move throughout the day without sitting on my computer? And am I actually balancing my outdoor exposure? Because we know that is a part of the fundamentals of health, that being outdoors is something that we're thirsty for as a whole, as human beings. Not to mention energy medicine, right? So it's like red light, receiving that red light outdoors, even off plants, has been researched to improve health, to help support something called our mitochondrial turnover and cellular function, because everything comes down to cells, right? And how to support your cells. And then, as I said, it's not always just the nutritional fundamentals. So there's no exact, like, you have to do one thing, but you have to start just looking at your different nodes of improvement. Like, where can I help myself nutritionally? Where can I help myself sleep-wise? And start kind of teasing away. Because ultimately it reduces many of your risk factors for many health conditions as you age, going from cardiometabolic, cancers, I mean, you name it. We know that these are all risk factors for these health conditions and diseases as we age.
That makes sense. And I'm also just thinking, like, for like, there's a lot of risk to the hidden risk to the corporate lifestyle as well. Like, sitting indoors all the time, working on laptops, work from home, just, I notice, like, as I get older, my body starts giving me feedback much faster. For example, if I don't sit properly at a desk, within like a day or so, I start feeling the pain in, my upper back, and I try to, balance that out with similar workouts. But you're right, probably like it needs more personalized understanding of who the person is, and, there's no one size fits all here. And I'm wondering, like, what is a good recommended way that you would suggest is like, weighing between proven practices versus trendy biohacks that we talked about earlier? Is it again the same approach that you took to your life, like, high agency, understanding that nobody's really looking out for you like the way you would look out for yourself?
The landscape currently, viewing the functional medicine approach, viewing lifestyle medicine as well as a part of the need in our society, right? Let's just say North America. That layered with plucking some of the protocols and making it this, as you said, like this trendy biohacking, I have to buy this machine because now I'm going to be so, optimized. And so there's a big conversation there, because listen, core fundamentally, when you start talking about any part of any business, right? Not even, functional medicine, healthcare, there is a component of, it's a business model. So of course you have to look at everything a little bit, I mean, is that exactly doable? Is that research based? Is it because somebody's just trying to sell something, right? I am not, again, going back, I'm a realist. I have seen manipulations in the healthy sector, where there's conflicts of interest, there's, the core reasoning is to sell a product. that's there too. It's not
Mhm.
this pure, it's just to help change society kind of thing, because at the end of the day, it's still a business. So you have to be a realist too. And how to tease out what is actually science-based or actually evidence-based versus something that's trendy. Unfortunately, that takes a little bit of work on the consumer, where they do have to ask some questions. Like, where is the research behind this? Always look at conflicts of interest. Always. And I think that's for everything, and is this right for me? Of course, that's the next question, whether it's, very well known on the internet or social media. Is this right for me? It might be something you may want to bring up to someone in your healthcare circle. And hopefully by then, maybe you have one or two team members that will be able to help analyze what you're choosing. I get this all the time at work. Between, do I get a red light this? Do I buy these blue light glasses? I get this question all the time, because there's so much, I don't want to say noise, but there's so much direct to consumer sales that makes it confusing. And I wish it wasn't that way, where people feel so confused. But I do have to say, sometimes I actually have to reel my patients in, because I get very extreme biohacking patients, which I love because I understand them. But sometimes I have to reel them in. And the reeling in is, are you doing the core fundamentals? Minus the fancy machine, minus all the stuff that you're now supplements. Of course, we could go into that conversation, but minus all this stuff, are you doing the core fundamentals? Period. Because if you're not, that's a problem. Let's reel it back in, and then let's start adding things maybe. So I think we get lost, and I do think there's a disconnect right now with tools. We have actually so many tools, and I will put a very light address on AI. AI is going to help bring functional medicine to the masses. Okay. And I'm a doctor of AI. I believe in AI. And I think it's going to change a lot of things that we do. But in terms of this space, going back to how is this going to actually work for everyone? We're going to be using AI. That's why. But anyway, fundamentals. Just reel it in sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think I saw some videos where you could see, like, running in the 90s, this person just puts on their short and the shoes and this shirt, and they just go for a run, and that's it. And now I saw, like, this is like a meme video where you look at runners now, they have all this heart rate and their watch, and they can't go on a run without telling everybody they went on a run. And I feel that, that's similar. Like, I can imagine, like, people who are really geared up, like, their sleep routine looks like, an army regiment, like, they have a watch, they had the blue light, the red light, then they have the, the special mattress, which has temperature controlled. But I do agree. I think that I still believe those are really early adopters in that graph. There's just no way a majority issue. I'm wondering, like, for the majority of people, do you think there's some truth in the statement that there's more risks to be avoided? So in the sense that you get a lot more benefit by doing the fundamentals, which, as you said, like, so basically I would imagine, like, okay, just by not just drinking or smoking, the amount of benefits that you get kind of outweigh, those minor returns that you get, on these optimizations on your circadian rhythm, and like your weightlifting versus cardio. Like, those are, I feel, are all like minor adjustments. But if you're still, like, missing out on the biggest things, like, which are proven over time, I'm wondering, like, is that also one of the philosophies that instead of adopting newer habits and practices, which are very hard, and again, as you said, like there might not be research in there, but way more easier ways to first start doing the easiest of things or the most impactful of things. And then could you talk about what those things might be?
Yes. So going into the tools. So yes, the things that you listed, I see them as tools, right? So somebody may actually do very well with a tracker. That really boosts their compliance. It makes them feel like goal oriented. So not to say these things are like a no. It's more of you don't need them. It's just some of these things will help certain patients get to a next level, but it's not necessary all the time because, as I said, most people don't even have the basics of the core fundamentals of the pillars of health, or prevention. This is probably going to be a very like curveball for you, because I'd love to say like eat a Mediterranean diet. I know this is sleep. You said like get your heart rate, all these things. Like this is really, I'm all about the mind. I have this belief that it's mindset, emotional, social. I feel like that is actually the primary tackle where, obviously I would love to say like, don't smoke, don't drink. I mean, but I actually like for my position being in the clinical side of things for whatever amount of years, even before I started transitioning into the functional medicine mindset and reflective on, it's not even 20 years. It's more than 20 years that I've been dealing with patients now. And just general people. I think that mindset, being able to clear your mind, being able to find outlets that resonate with you, that make you present, that make you feel gratitude, that make you feel that you have that emotional stability, that social stability. You have people that care for you, that you care for people. Love, that actually to me is one of the most grounding pillars that I think is so much more important than just what we eat. Because that is, it really just, it branches out to all the other pillars. And I say this with like obviously some reserve because it's not as scientific. You eat this, you get this nutrient, and your cellular function is like this. But human behavior, which ultimately all the other things we need behavior change, we need motivation, discipline, all the things. That core part of that emotional, social, fundamental feeling that we feel good there, or we feel okay there at this point, not even good. I think that's really essential for all the rest. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I think even in the biohacking world, where we're going into the mattresses and we're, getting all of our studies, do we feel present? I don't like to use the word happy, but do we have happy outlets? Are we laughing? Are we having joy? Do we have support with our family?
Right.
I think that's something that has resonated with me so much because it does make a difference in the patient's motivation to do all those other things. And I don't think it's actually addressed enough.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point. Even in the conversation that I had with Dr. Kapai, and he was talking about like how obesity is no longer the epidemic in the United States. It's actually the loneliness. And they have actually, he was quoting some of the research on like just, you know, like being lonely, like can kind of impact, like takes almost like a decade away from your life, like just being lonely, and you might be, taking care of yourself, but just that factor that you don't have people to share with, laugh with, and, keep you in check with. That is like one of the biggest concerns. And yeah, I mean, I completely resonate with that. I think it just becomes way easier if you have a safety net of people that that keep you in check, and it just keeps you honest. It makes it very easy to do all those positive habits that you try to do on your own life, but it just makes it easy if you have like a group of people around that. And that's why I'm such a big fan of sports, because they involve you to interact with people. Back when I was growing up, like if you had to play cricket, which is a team sport, you had to find 11 friends. And that was a game in itself, to find those 11 people at 7 a.m. to go and play. And that really improved your social skills, your understanding how to convince people. Like,
Yep.
waking up at 7 a.m. is not a fun sport on the weekends. And so I think, transitioning to like preventive care, and we touched upon monitoring. Dr. Neda, I'm wondering that if people who don't have access to functional medicine doctors, and they're not in those areas, and they don't know where to start out, or let's say if they don't even have access to those doctors, like are there some uh like tests they should be doing, which is this, like from their perspective, like as a doctor, like you would say that these are the main things, and that I'm pretty sure they would include questions about their sleep, their health and mental, but are there also some tests they should be keeping an eye on over time?
Yeah. I think, yes, going back into the layered approach of it, like, of course, if you have this great team in the functional medicine space and everybody's well versed and everybody's doing what they're doing to support your journey within testing all your various systems, like, as I said, gut health, etc. But then there's okay, I can't do all that, I don't have access to that. What are a few things I could do? So I would say right now, in a very basic approach, I think one fundamental is make sure your vitamin D is proper. That is, again, I always, it's like, this is like low hanging fruit, if that makes sense. Like, this is a very simple, it should be a part of general standard. I'm assuming who you're asking for is like somebody who does have access to general health care, but not so much going into the functional medicine.
Right.
So vitamin D, it's easy. That's an easy one. There should be no reason that it should be tanked with fundamentally cheap, good supplements, outside sun, and an easy blood test that can be added. I think that's one grounded, like, just take that off your list of fixing, right? I think in addition to that, are good fat ingestion. So meaning making sure we're getting proper omega-3s in our diet. And I'm talking more dietarily right now. Omega-3s being within the algae space if you're vegan, and then obviously the salmon family. Having proper levels of omega-3 ingestion, I think, is a huge positive, and there are easy blood tests too for that if you were able to receive that. I think in terms of other nutrients, I think it's the iron panel is huge. I think women in particular do not have good iron panels done, and it can be done through primary medical model where they're getting the iron profile, not just iron levels, ferritin, etc. I think women are, in particular, not addressing or getting the proper direction in that, so they can start fundamentally getting that tested and helping it versus with a small supplement that is very easy to use, or changing some dietary habits, increasing their heme iron ingestion. I think those are some highlights, very, very low level. And we can go into the nuances of getting your B vitamins checked and taking, making sure you're having enough vitamin C throughout the day, your antioxidant load of green leafy vegetables, and all the standard of care vegetable checkpoints of your day, making sure you're having like a variety of colors within your diet. Part two, outside of like those very, very basic core nutritional things, it's really gut health. So for example, a lot of people don't talk about their gut frequency, stool types, etc., unless there's something extreme. It happens all the time. It's like almost every time. Until I ask the actual proper question to my patient, like, what is your stool like? How many times do you use the bath? There's no response, or there's no investigation. So being in tune with your digestive frequency and your digestive is very important for core fundamental disease prevention, because think about it, that is one of the ways that we detox. We're putting the outside world into our bodies when we eat. So if there's something wrong going down that line of our digestive tract, then that can be a cause of inflammation long term. So if there is some imbalances and you're like, this is not supposed to happen, then yes, now maybe there's a way that we can kind of adjust that, where you may be a good candidate for probiotics, eating more fermented foods in your life. Now that's being very like Band-Aid-y versus looking at the actual what's happening in the gut. I would say keeping the gut happy is very important as just a basic part of functional medicine. If you don't have the functional medicine kind of team. And then going back to, as we kind of touched on before, sleep, thriving with sleep, trying to have movement, walking outside, natural light, going back to those few things. And then there are, for the more outside, no one's in our area in terms of functional medicine, now we have a lot of online tools, we really do, that are not as financially burdening as you would think. So there are doctors now, we have much more accessibility with something called direct consumer labs that have, the price point has gone down so much over these past 10 years, that can be utilized to help fill in those gaps where that patient is, wherever they live, to maybe start teasing out some of the reasonings behind some of their symptoms. So I would say that's only going to get better.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully so.
For somebody's eye health, I can only see so much. Pixelation, etc. So that next level of basically these biomarkers that show early signs of other health conditions outside of what we've already been traditionally used to is absolutely accessible now. It's not being implemented yet. So research, we're constantly getting research coming out where the retinal image is being used for various other health conditions that were not, that were never linked to a retinal image in terms of being used as a biomarker, because it's fundamentally, it's cheap to just take a picture of the eye. There's really no downtime. So I think that sector is going to be used a lot, not in the optometric world, but now in other sectors of other subspecialties, to use the eye as a tool for early detection of other chronic diseases. And for myself right now, of course, I use the eye wherever I see the imbalances, because we can see a cardiovascular risk in the cornea, even where we see patients who have cholesterol imbalance with a simple, you just see it in their cornea. It's called arcus. I see it all the time. There's, different hemorrhages that can be viewed connected to other systemic diseases, whether it's in the front of the eye or the back of the eye, these microhemes, they call them. So even right now, without using these higher level type of biometric testing, I think the eye is always a tool to be used. I use it as a conversation opener with my patients, typically. Like, I'm seeing this in your eyes. Let's talk about what's going on with your lipid profile. When was the last time you had a lipid profile? Are you going through hormonal changes? Because that's what I'm actually presenting this in a few weeks. Women are getting these cholesterol spikes within the perimenopausal timeline, and it's showing up in their eyes in like 1 year. And it's just out of nowhere. And having that conversation now, what else are you feeling? What are some other symptoms that you're feeling? And have you been up to date with some of these lab tests that we need? But I do think the eye will be used as a very, very important tool for just our whole healthcare system in the future, because it's coming out. Longevity, we have.
It's kind of very unbelievable that you're just looking like, I think eye scans have been done like for such a long time, but only on those narrow disease detection, or like just not as an indicator to overall health. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is like, you in future potentially you would go to a clinic, and they would run, like they do the blood testing, they would run your retinal exam, which I think your pupil just needs to be dilated, and they take a picture of your retina, and they can tell you about your I think you mentioned about your cardiac health, about hormonal imbalance, about hemorrhages. That's a lot of information just from an eye scan. Do you think that is no longer that is in practice? That's no longer a fantasy, right?
No, it's not a fantasy. Absolutely not. I mean, the NIH even. I mean, this is not just like a sidebar. Some companies like trying to like biohack something, and no, this is currently happening. Research is currently being pumped out. Clinically, it's being used, and I do see a very, very strong future for this sector of eye care. And I'm not even going to call it eye care. It's really just using the eye for healthcare. It's actually impressive that we have so much data. That's the other part. So we have so much data. We have so many images that we can use. And now with these AI models, we can process so much information quickly to get to these types of, I guess you can say usages for this image for particular conditions, neurological, cardiovascular, as we said, and there's more. It's not far away. It's not far away, because it's happening.
That sounds pretty exciting. And then what do you imagine what do you imagine in like next 5-10 years for a person going to like for integrative medicine or functional medicine, like what do you expect? What do you imagine the experience to be for a patient walking in? Um, is it like a lot of diagnostics, but mainly through conversation? I'm wondering, like, and is it like a recurring cycle? If um, if everything going fine, they come every quarter. I'm just wondering, like, what does the experience from a patient side look like? Uh, from the perspective that you're really in the gist of it. I'm just wondering, like, how do you project it out in the future from where it is today? And as you said, AI is going to be used a lot more there.
Yes, because it's a lot of information. So going back to our first conversation, how are we going to do all these things? So I do think we're going to see new clinics. These clinics are going to have multiple things within one versus, all these silos. Um, and these clinics are going to have proper diagnostics where they're going to, have proper lab processing, et cetera, et cetera. Patient will go through whatever they have to go through, the protocol of, testing basics of nutrient deficiencies, going all the way to a quick microbiome test, right? Which also has AI fundamentals now too, where we can use gut health and various algorithms, and we won't get into that. So there will be these diagnostic tools. There will be healthcare providers. I don't like to say doctors because doctors only do whatever. Then we have coaches. We have other disciplinaries that we don't use enough. And it's going to be a multi-centered place that is going to also use AI to process all this information, where the patient's going to be given whatever tools they need to be given with proper follow-ups, which can be used virtually, which is going to be also a very big, important part of this, and direct-to-consumer follow-ups, meaning testing. So where you don't have to always constantly go back physically to that clinic, things can be followed up virtually. Labs can be done, from home. And that's what I foresee. Is insurance going to, and we do have these mini models already. They already started, coming into fruition. The insurance part is the question.
Hmm. Yes, and that's where I think the government, acts as a,
And
either as a helper or a regulator, like to see like how to take it to people.
right. So I don't think actually the creation of the system is going to be that hard. I mean, it's not easy, but I think we have enough proactive innovators out there who have already started these models, who are doing it, who have already gone back with fixing, adjusting, and it's happening. I actually don't find that and we have passionate people like myself who want to get in there and do it. And it's the other part of the system. Will that support it? And that's the insurance. And that's really what it's, I think it's the insurance. Is the insurance model going to be progressing with this shift?
Right. And I think that's where I also like the opener for this conversation is, in your case, like you actually had to take the driving seat for the whole like diagnosis. You could not just outsource it to somebody because you realize that this is something that can't be outsourced so easily. And it's very cool that I'm in India right now, and like, for example, in Delhi, you can pay $10 and a person would come to your home.
Mhm.
And you can there's an app which you can just select what all like lipid profiles or what all tests you want to be done. They can do like oral glucose testing, which is a 3-hour test. They come home like 3 times, and it's $15-20. So I make it a habit that whenever I'm home, me and my wife get all our medical tests done. Although we have to pay for it, and our insurance covers them in the US, it's just way more convenient. You don't have to go collect the reports and everything. They come to your house, and I definitely feel like the two worlds are very separate, but there's advantages in both. And But this was a very exciting conversation, Dr. Ned. I think this sets me up on a path to learn more about functional medicine, and I'm really excited about the future and how this comes into play for people at scale. And I just wanted to ask you finally, like, where can people find you? Where can people see some of your work? And then the more actively research, and when you publish things, is it more on LinkedIn? Where can people like reach out to you or follow your journey in this functional medicine field?
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that you see the discrepancy. Living in a foreign country right now, that it can be done to some it's not always, it's not such an extreme jump. We can start doing things now. Yes. So I toggle a few hats. I obviously see patients clinically. I call it my micro practice now, because I really try to do really deep one-on-ones with my patients. So I see patients here in Shrewsbury, New Jersey. You can find me on integrativevision.com. And that's just one word, Integrative Vision. And by the way, the name of my practice is nothing to do with vision. So, because obviously I'm an eye doctor, like everybody thinks, oh, you have vision in your name. It's really just, it's like my vision. So,
Mhm.
that's one thing I like to kind of remark on. But integrativevision.com to become a patient. And then we're actually launching probably Q1 of 2026, something called the C Health virtual program. So this is to really fill the gap for patients who have eye diseases and really need more clarification and more support in terms of nutrition, functional medicine approach to their eye disease. And that will be a virtual program. So that's going to be on chealth.health. And then in terms of like my personal journeys and all the other things I do, whether it's in a nonprofit sector, or if I'm publishing something, or doing a presentation, usually LinkedIn is the best under Neda Gioia, Neda Gioia. And then I also have my personal drnedagioia.com, drnedagioia.com, where I kind of really talk about my journey, and also help other practitioners. That's another part of my role, start implement this type of system in their practice. So I do consult other doctors to just kind of start micro dosing functional medicine into their practice for their patients. So you can find me on that as well.
No, that's amazing. And I think I personally like had, my personal motives to reach out to you was like, I see like in my whole family, like, and in Delhi, like I believe there's just a vastly underreported cases of like, for example, cancer. And it's eye-opening, when I come here. For example, four of my elders, 4 out of 4 have some sort of cancer. And it is just, when I go visit the hospitals, I see like half of the city, just in those cases. And I feel that people should be more in the driving seat. There is a purpose for the conventional and traditional medicine, but I think it's a fast evolving field like most other fields, and I think AI is definitely going to help there. But I think just balancing those concepts, that root cause versus the medical iatrogenics, like always intervention is not helpful, but is generally prescribed. So there is personal motivation for me, like, to go into this and figure out, like, is there a more optimal or more, health span focused path than what has been traditionally.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you so much. If you have any final concluding thoughts, I think you might be also running late. I think we're a little bit over
Good.
the mark of there.
The final thoughts is, just small steps. Try to make small steps in the direction that you feel is right. Because otherwise it seems like impossible. So, whether it's in your own health journey, or if you find a passion to help the system, just start making small steps in that direction. Because you look back and sometimes you're like, wow, those were a lot of steps. And now I'm leap years where I thought I would be, X amount of years ago. So small steps in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. I hope this left you with a few good questions, perhaps a few laughs, and definitely a reminder to keep following your curiosity wherever it takes you. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay true to what matters the most, your inner scorecard. Thank you.